We're ready to go. Thank you. So welcome everybody to the April Science Education Department Science Seminar Series. It is our distinct pleasure to present to you the Sound of Science Blue Man Group, Instruments and Technology. And we are thrilled to invite or to welcome Ben Flint, Andrew Schneider, and Bill Swartz from Chicago, New York, and Abu Dhabi at the moment, respectively. This is the creative technical team and sound and production engineers for the acclaimed Blue Man Group musical production. So this is a presentation of science, STEM, and creativity in the arts and music, utilizing science and engineering in developing one-of-a-kind precision instruments and a unique musical language from everyday tools and materials, as you will see. Incorporating science, technology, and engineering into the creative arts and music production has yielded award-winning results around the world. So please engage with us and enjoy this blend of seminar. And welcome to Ben, Bill, and Andrew. Take it away.
Hello. Thanks for having us and letting us borrow your ears. This is a very cool opportunity. My name's Andrew Schneider. I came from there it is. Here we go. I came from our artistic family. Both my parents were ballet dancers, dancing in London and New York and Montreal and Paris. And as their dancing years started to end, they decided to open up a ballet school and opened up a ballet school called Classical Ballet Cambridge in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for kids up to adults. So that was the atmosphere I grew up in. Very artistic, very creative, quite humble. But that was that. So I just fell in love with art and music from very early on. I started playing Frisbee with rubber bands, and then that went to clarinet and then saxophone and then bass guitar, and started playing in bands, and just fell for it 100%. So I started touring around the States and then over in Europe a bunch. And at the same time, my band's first record, we recorded at a studio in Boston called New Alliance. And we still owed a fair amount of money. So I offered to intern for free to try and pay off some of the money it cost to make our first record. And through that, something clicked pretty fast, where I realized like you could actually have a living and a career in a profession that had, for me, great intrinsic satisfaction. So after that, I remember it was like in one day just clicked. So I just dove all in, and within a couple of years, I was the head engineer for that studio. And another engineer at that same studio was a friend of all of ours, Todd Perlmutter, who moved to New York and was slated to produce the first album for Blue Man Group audio. And so he asked me if I would like to engineer that record. So that started a 2-year process of going to the Lower East Side and working with Blue Man Group to record what was audio, their first album, which was was Grammy nominated, and took a long time. And it was an incredible experience, learning curve and experience, melding all art and music and theater and performance and creativity in ways that I'd never experienced ever experienced before. So after that, I kept working with the company for about 3 decades on different recording projects. Came on staff in their creative development department in 2014, and there I just had the home that you dream of. Every week was a different challenge of installing surround sound lobby installations or museum installations, or recording surround sound audio for VR experiences, as well as the albums, as well as developing the shows, as well as developing the instruments. So that was fantastic. And then at the same time, I've always been running studios and working as a freelance engineer and producer. And so that has continued on. And now I have a studio called Acre Audio, where I do most of my mix work and post-production work, and then also I still fly all over the world to make records. Next slide, Ben.
Hi, guys. So we are going to just, we're trying to put together kind of a mosaic of experiences here. So please indulge our background talk, because it will lead somewhere. I hope, like our lives have. It's all sort of get on the river and find where it takes you. And similarly, I had a start in a family where either I've not gone very far, or I've ended up using all the stuff that I learned when I was a little kid, because I grew up with both sets of grandparents, one set of whom had a small factory, a chemical factory, a thing with like conveyor belts and big hoppers and all sorts of completely fascinating things for a little kid who likes mechanics. And my parents had a small business in one of the loading dock bays. It was like a machine shop sort of thing where they sold and serviced those weight equipment from like the 70s with the plates and the pulleys and cables and all that stuff. And I also lived next door to some guy who had a construction company who gave us jobs during the summers, where he taught us how to get along with people on a construction site and how to frame a wall and read a blueprint and all that sort of stuff. And so I was pretty well set up to find kind of like a use your hands sort of labor job when I got to college and I needed a work study gig. And I'd never been in theater before, but somebody said, why don't you go talk to this guy over there, that there's a shop in this theater. I had no idea. But it was amazing. And it was one of those things where you meet the right person at the right time. And it happened to be the head of the theater department, where I ended up TAing for him and spending basically 4 years really, really happy, learning all sorts of things about the specific tech to theater, but also the art of putting on a show and building sets and all this sort of thing. And I went to school to be a musician, so I ended up getting a double major there. And when I was done, I went back to Chicago, and maybe this happened I think in a lot of cities in the late 80s and early 90s, but it was a totally different place back then. It was kind of small, and it was just starting to grow. And suddenly there were all of a sudden places that you could play music, and new restaurants and nightclubs and little boutiques and stuff like that. So, and it all felt kind of like one scene. So during the day, I would build places for people, design, build sort of thing. And then at night, I tried to be in a band. And through that scene, I met this woman named Bridget Murphy, who had a weird sort of offbeat psychedelic variety performance art thing called Millie's Orchid Show. And she brought Blue Man in from New York. They didn't have any shows open yet or anything. They were just kind of street performers at the time, doing like little gigs like this. And it was really new and cool and super fun. So when they finally moved to Chicago, they opened a show in New York, then Boston, and then they came to Chicago in 97. I went to see it and met all the people there. And it was really incredible to see. It was like being in a huge band. Everyone was friends with everyone else. No one had a really super defined job, it seemed like. They ended up hiring me for this job called Theater Jack, for Jack of all trades. And you ended up just doing whatever needed to be done in that sort of day. And through there, I quickly met the creative team in New York. And then it sort of took off. It was another being in the right place at the right time. They were just ready to expand internationally. So I moved to Berlin to open the first international show there. And that went really well. I ended up moving there. And then the team that opened that show became kind of like the technical team that would open the shows around the world. And there was about a 10-year period where we went to every continent and get to spend like 2 months in a place and build a new theater and meet new people and like adjust the show for a different market, that sort of thing. And around 2010, I moved back to New York to open a R&D studio, which is where Ben and Andrew and I got together. It was a recording studio in the Lower East Side of New York, where upstairs on the 3rd floor, I would work with electronics and mechanics and whatever needed to be done to make special effects props or new instruments. Then there was a recording studio on the 1st and 2nd floor. And then in the basement was music instrument technician, where Ben was. And that's how we got together and had about a really good decade of us working together in the same building. It was really, really fun.
Hey there, I'm Ben Flint. I think the through line of this is the friends and the community, and it's kind of the networking of everything, of how it all kind of pieced together. I grew up in a little town in Michigan, and I think I was thinking about this. I was always kind of a tinkerer, taking things apart, trying to make a solar car out of my calculator, which never worked, or figuring out how to modify a cassette tape and record a rap or something with 2 different cassette decks or something. So I was always kind of tinkering. Growing up in Michigan in a little town, there really wasn't much to do other than the medical field or farming or mechanics, industrial factory, which I did for a little while, and never really clicked with that. So I kind of just took a chance, and not really knowing where to go or what to do. I bought a Volkswagen and I started traveling the country looking for audio production schools or something. I always had a love for music, so wanted to learn how to record the music. Didn't want to be in front of people or the front person of a band, but I always loved the technical side and I wanted to be involved in some way. So I went to Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences in Arizona, which led me to Chicago for an internship where I was working at a music studio, Electrical Audio, owned by Steve Albini. And I was a staff engineer for a while, working part-time. And one of the bands that I recorded, the singer, we were just having a conversation and I was looking for extra work. And he was like, you should come go down Belmont. Cool place. You'll love it. It'll be great. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I was actually late my first day. Walked in the door to the Briar Street Theater, really no clue, just wanted work. Thought the one guy I met was cool, and was working house staff scanning tickets, and ended up sitting down, and opening paint drumming happened, and these funny blue clowns come out and the crowd's just going completely crazy. And at that moment I was hooked. It was like, oh, what is happening? How did I miss this? Through that, I just kind of got immersed in the people and the culture and the fun of everything, and started working on props. And at one point I was running video camera on stage as a sub. Bill mentioned theater jack. I was a lobby jack. So I was like fixing sprinklers and lights in the lobby. Ultimately, there was a moment speaking with a longtime drum tech and drummer, Noah Legger. He said, hey, do you want to be an MIT, which is probably different than you all are familiar with, but musical instrument tech. And it was like most things, I just say yes and then figure it out later. So I found myself on tour, the North American tour, as a musical instrument tech, it meant pitch tuning drums and electric zithers and Chapman sticks and talking drums, lots of MIDI, and of course a PVC organ. And something I didn't realize at the time, when I graduated high school, I took a job as a plumber. So I did that for like a year, going to community college, just studying the gen ed stuff. So it all kind of tied together, and I found this moment of I learned how to do plumbing, and now I'm making organs out of PVC, which was pretty topical. So it all kind of leads together. Ultimately, like Bill said, I made it to New York, where I was the technical manager for musical instruments for Blue Man Group up until 2019. I still work in the Chicago show on the weekends, tuning and teching the drums.
We should probably talk about Blue Man Group itself before we get into how it was that we worked together and some of the things that we did. And, you can find there's a bunch of different things that have been written about this. We'll, at the end of this talk, we can share some resources like links to different articles or some interesting YouTube things or whatever. But this is my version, which is kind of, there's going to be a Rashomon quality to this. If you asked the other people on this call, it would probably be different, but I think the spirit of this at least is true. Which is, you start in the 80s with a bunch of post-college friends, and they're all just in New York, and they are interested in things. They don't know what to do about it. They're kind of dissatisfied with the world they live in, but they're just trying to share things with each other. So they have these little salons where they get together once a week, and they bring in anything that they've seen, talk about movies, talk about whatever, fun posters that they saw on the wall, anything. And it's fun, and there's a lot of energy about it, but they're like, we got something. So they decide they're going to have a happening, and they're literate about this sort of stuff, and maybe they've read Marshall McLuhan, I don't know what, but somehow they have the idea to send out a press release for this very first thing that they do, and it actually gets covered on MTV with Kurt Loder. You can look that up on YouTube. And they just go to Central Park and just put a bunch of stuff in a garbage can and burn it. I guess you could do that back then, just right in the open. And it went so well that now they suddenly have confidence to just walk around on the Lower East Side and go in and out of bars and talk to people. And there's still just a bunch of people like this that you can see this there on the right, just wearing regular clothes with bald caps, but they're still talking. But at one point, something happens in a bar and they shut up. And that's when the people start reacting. It was just like an accident. And they feel like, oh, okay, we're on to something now. But now they're bald, blue, mute people walking into bars. So they kind of have to think of something to do. And a couple of them were drummers. So they started with that, this bang on stuff. And but since they also wanted it to be strange, or at least new, they had to modify the instruments a little bit. So do we have paint drums on the next slide, Ben? Yeah. So that's that top left over there. The first of their signature instruments is just like an oil barrel sort of drum where they put paint on it with a light inside. And that was fun, but that led to wanting to play some notes. So they went to the hardware store and found some PVC tubes, and made some things to bang on them with. And then it was kind of time they needed to put some people in the band too, because it's got more energy with that. And but the rules held there too. So nothing, if we've seen it before, we can't use it type of thing. So the first 3 instrumentalists that supported this group had to kind of come up with their own way of doing things. And there was a tabletop guitar sort of thing that had chords, like guitar chords on it, and then what we call the harp section, and just a bunch of electric guitar pickups on it, built by this single guy. And then a Chapman stick, which is at the time, pretty obscure instrument If you listen to King Crimson in the early 80s or Peter Gabriel, you might have heard it before, but the way Larry Heineman, the original stick player, used it was to cut up bass strings and kind of scrape it against there. It's totally not the way it's supposed to be used, but it did make a great rhythmic and sustained pitch noise. So, and the drum kits were also kind of weird. Things were in the wrong place. There were extra noise-making things around. So they get, once again, it's a sort of thing where there's success in the formula of experimentation. So it kind of gets you to want to keep doing that. And they started to do these one-off little bits where there'd be like a little performance just of maybe paint drumming and some other getting in and out. And that led them to wanting to make kind of an off-Broadway show. And that was workshopped in a couple of places before it went to the place where it still is now, Astor Place Theater in New York, when it opened in 1991. And one day, the last little bit of development for them was one day that, like, the three of them, the three Blue Men people, were the three Blue Men. They had to play every show. They played 100, 200 shows in a row until one of them broke their hand, or like cut their hand, and couldn't play the show that night. So one of the substitute drummers sat in for him, and then the lights went off. The light bulb went off, like, oh, we don't even have to be on stage for this. We can think about a whole bunch of other stuff and get other people to do it. And then I started training people, open up the show in Boston, open up a show in Chicago, and then all that international stuff that I was telling you about before. And that's kind of where they are now.
Yeah, as Bill was mentioning, the band, who you see on the left there, and something that was always and is always special to me about Blue Man Group is the group aspect of it, where there is no one single person. It's this synergy of everyone involved. And this picture on the right, you can see me in there somewhere. I have a black shirt on. This was a show, I believe this was the world tour in Canada, 2017, 2018, that we all worked on. So this was just the install crew. And it just kind of gives you a scale of what Blue Man Group is. And we've got the technicians and the management and lighting and truck drivers and people selling merch and designers and directors and performers. And you kind of all come together, and it's hard to explain the camaraderie of what Blue Man Group is and how ideas are created and problems are solved. If you've always got a lifeline, you've always got somebody that's interested in what's happening in the world, in art and science and culture. And so you can always try and throw an idea out, and someone is always going to take the ball and help you get it over the finish line, most of the time successfully.
Yeah, going on with what Ben was saying, that the community aspect was just a super driving force. I think Blue Man Group always has attracted some incredible talent, I think, both through the opportunities that the working with the company offers, but also like super rigorous many-month audition process for a lot of the performers. It has always brought in just the best of the best. And so for me, working that atmosphere, it was great. I felt like my part of it, there was a trust that by the time a project in whatever stage was coming by my desk, that there was a trust that I was going to do my best work. But there was also an expectation that that work was going to be fulfilled, and also hopefully sort of like up the game, you know, like bring something more to the vision than was originally thought of. And that sort of balance of trust and expectation, you know, at its best becomes infectious. So everyone is adding their part at a really high level. I think that one example I like to use for talking about the process and the community at Blue Man was this. We were designing all these different things for a new show, and at one point I came up with this idea of possibly creating an oversized metronome as an instrument that the Blue Men could play. So metronome, that's that picture on the left. I don't know, probably everyone's seen it. It just keeps time. And the concept being that they would use this not just to keep time, but to actually start to play on the instrument itself and turn it into a musical instrument. And as was the way we did it, there wasn't any idea that didn't sort of like enter into conversation early with everyone. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but Bill ran with the idea, trying to fit it more into the narrative of the show that we were developing. And so over the course of many months, it went from this idea of a simple metronome to all of a sudden it was this 20-foot tall drum wall that was played via a sequencer all the way on the other side of the stage, hitting hitting these drums across the whole wall, and not just drums, but any sort of percussion element that we could fit into it. So there was pieces of scrap metal, there was rubber chickens, there was clapper hands, and again, it was all controlled by this other sequencer on the other side of the wall with mechanical drum parts. So it was basically like a gigantic analog drum machine. So what makes that happen? So I came up with this idea, Bill ran with it, totally turned it into something really different. So then that came back to us to start to try to create the compositional aspects that could make that work. So at this point, now we're off and running. So Bill is upstairs creating these all the mechanical aspects to make this drum wall work. Ben is running around from everywhere from top drum suppliers to back alley metal trash, trying to sort of source materials that we can use as stuff. I'm working with our lead composer, Jeff Turlick, who's super talented, to try to start to create compositions that now work within the parameters of this new design. Then it has to be developed enough to fit into a stage design from the whole stage designer. We have to, the performers have to learn these parts. Just across the whole company, one idea that happens one day in one room, all of a sudden everyone's on board, ready to pivot at a moment and keep just going and going and going until you have a final result. So that last picture shows on the right shows at least part of the wall as it was, and then I think Ben has a short video that shows at least some of the drums triggering, though not the rubber chicken. And the visual aspects, like, so those cords that are cables that are connected, that are going off screen right, are connected to the sequencer on the other side of the stage. And throughout the performance, the tempo of this piece starts to speed up and the drums get faster and more furious. And then I think we faked an explosion, or there was some smoke, and there you go.
At one time, there was real smoke. Cool. Are you good to move on, or Bill, do you want to chime in on anything on this one?
No, I think I'm going to tell a flip side story, maybe. We've got the all hands on deck sorts of things that happen. But also, Blue Man had gotten big enough where we'd constantly be asked by potential partners, sometimes media people, sometimes producers in other markets, sometimes another artist, to do collaborations. And I would get calls more from like the World Science Museum, or the World Science Festival in New York, who were looking for something spectacular, and which is what they usually say. And that's great, but not everything can be sort of a rehash of this is what we do on stage, or what is Blue Man. We were always struggling with feeling like we were in a box a little bit, and wanted it to be a thing where something can be Blue Man and kind of feel right, and kind of feel like the art project itself, Blue Man Group, without there being what we would disparagingly say, the three bald clowns. We said that lovingly too, but so when a thing like World Science Festival comes up, it's really a chance to do something where you're really communicating with a different voice. First of all, we can talk. We're going to make a little presentation, and we can kind of put across a different sort of theatricality, which to me I was always interested in how things actually get done, not like making it seem like magic. To me, it's much more interesting to know actually what goes on. That's definitely a bigger emotional win. So I wanted to make a little exhibit that could be performative and be something that you could play with, but also allows you to understand maybe, or even ask questions about how this is working. And I went a couple times to these sorts of science fair things, and I would always make a fact page that I would just make up. I would like create all the questions you could possibly ask about this thing and then answer them myself, so that there'd be like no mystery about how these are all the parts we used. This is how we thought of this thing. This is exactly how it works. And for this first one, we made what you can kind of see there is a 64-step 8-channel sequencer, which is kind of a way to make little drum beats. And it's a treadmill, essentially, with wooden slats on it. Those are plastic cups with metal screws. And we made these little magnets that had acorn nuts on top of them that would, when you dump them into the little cups, they would make the cups tall enough that they would hit the limit switch as it went by on this thing. And then it's just a matter of controlling the speed and then taking the output of those 8 limit switches and sending it to a MIDI encoder and deciding what sounds you're going to assign to each of those channels. But the interesting thing about this, because it is just a step sequencer that anybody has in their phone at this point, and lots of people just intuitively know how this thing works, the tangible aspect of these physical objects going around and around right past you that you can pick up and move, and that you're making decisions ahead of time out here in the bed of the thing, and they're not actually making noise until later. And so you're like changing the beat, then listening later to what it sounded like, then changing something that you think is the right thing. You're trying to pay attention to which was that sound. And I can't tell you how mesmerizing that thing is. I mean, I'm a drummer my whole life, and I've been messing around with drum machines and stuff since the like 1984 or so. And every I got on this thing, thought, oh yeah, I know how it works. But then 5 minutes later, you realize they're like in a drool state because they've like reached this other sort of level of contemplation. But it's a really, really simple thing. And it came from like a different sort of need. Nobody needs this thing. It's not going to maybe help people make any sort of new music, but it might be a creative tool. And to me, it's a good reminder that you end up with something that you didn't expect when you're trying to do some sort of thing, and you end up with a different one. I wish we could play you this. There was a NPR Tiny Desk concert that the Blue Man Group did in 2017, which was the only time we ever used this instrument on stage. We'll put that too in the links so you can see it, because it's I think it's a pretty compelling piece of janky tech. You muted, Ben.
No, I got it. So in terms of talking about our process a little bit more, you know, the discovery process was a reoccurring thing in the narrative of Blue Man. So you know, oftentimes there's a lot of different lines where they would find something and find a use for it that is not its initial intended use, and because they're a character without words, find another language through music and sound often. So you know, that creates a nice starting place when you're sort of coming up with instruments and coming up with ideas. So one of the things that I have always loved about Blue Man is within that aspect, you can have not everything is larger than life, and everything is more awkward and cumbersome than it needs to be. So like when I was talking about the drum wall, that's like a 20-foot across 100-foot stage or whatever version of a drum machine that we can all have on our phones. Or their iconic PVC instrument is sort of like a huge 30-foot piano that you need 3 people to play. Part of that is because this is a stage presentation, but a lot of it is that it also gives you the space to sort of create, to show the character and show the complex relationships between the 3 of them as the stories go on. And so what does that mean when you're designing an instrument? If you're designing something that's larger than life, you have to start total blank page, free of any realistic parameters. Those parameters are going to come pretty quickly, but so your initial idea should be like just anything on a wall, you know. So one example of an instrument we were trying, we called it the feedback tubes. And you know, feedback, I'm sure everyone's experienced it. If you stick a microphone into a speaker, it starts a loop with a bad sound that most people don't like. And the concept here is that, you know, the guys would stumble upon feedback and then turn something ugly into something beautiful. So the concept for the instrument was you put a speaker on one side of a tube and you put a microphone on the other side of the tube, and it starts your feedback loop. And then the tubes, you can change the length of them, and that will change the pitch, which on initial sort of prototype designs was really exciting. As a single tube, we saw a lot of potential for it. So then we designed 2 tubes and started thinking of it as a piece that 3 Blue Men would play. And then the problems started to happen. So what happened was we quickly realized no matter how long a tube was, how the width of the tube, the density of the plastic, no matter what, it always had about an octave and a half of notes. So that's kind of hard to compose a piece for 3 people playing across just, you know, like 15, 16 notes total. So that limited us. But then the harder thing was we found that the instrument was wildly unstable. And the more we tried to sort of like develop the idea with 2 or 3 or 4 tubes, the more the lack of stability of the instrument itself was just like slapping us across the face. So I would go in and I would write an initial piece, say on 2 tubes on a Tuesday, and Wednesday I'd come in and be like, hey, check out this piece. And it was unplayable. The control of the instrument was different. It would spike to like a harmonic interval of the original note at different times. So we started wondering what's going on here. How can we control this? The concept is so good, we don't want to let it go. We started to streamline all of the parts. We built our own amplifiers, identical amplifiers connected on the backs of the speakers. We used identical microphones, identical microphone cables, identical mounting hardware, and still it helped a little bit, but for the most part it was still like, then it's Thursday and it still doesn't sound like it did on Wednesday. So when do you accept failure? We almost did not. We're pretty stubborn, so we kept going with it. But also in a process like this, you can learn so much the whole time you're failing. And I feel like the potential, we knew it was there for a good piece, so we just kept going with it, kept going every day, trying to figure out ways to control it, simplify it so that maybe we could embrace its flaws. And in the case of, and also as a company, we had a captive audience every night. So we were no strangers to throwing up a piece that's like 60% there, just to see how it works, how it reacts with audiences. So we thought that there was a chance that we could do that while we were still developing. In the case of this instrument, it made it to about 2 or 3 nights before opening night on a touring show. We just didn't feel confident putting it in front of, few thousand people that paid a lot of money to see a show, to have this thing just sort of wheeze and fail. So we let it go. But I don't think there's ever a time that we dropped something and just said, all right, that's done, it's over. I mean, I think the concept was good, and more R&D and more development would inevitably happen with it. But for that show, it was done. And as a side note, if anyone's ever seen Indiana Jones, the first one, the warehouse for Blue Man looks exactly like that last scene where they're in the warehouse dropping the Ark, with just like massive 30-foot shelves as far as you can see, with projects like the feedback tube, where it was an almost, or a could have been, or a we'll get back to it. And it's that's a fun museum walk where you're just like, what is that up there? So anyway.
We do have a quick video. I'm going to play that now.
Oh, yes. We were close.
That was fun. I really liked that.
Yeah.
So here's one that we did take to the stage, but some people say maybe we shouldn't have. No, I really liked it. And this is there was a real pressure cooker moment where we were going to open a big new show in Las Vegas, which is a good market for us. And we were looking for a lot of new material. And this is back to the whole, you got to build a team. This is something that I really, really learned on this one. And the nice arc about this particular piece and this particular instrument was it was maybe the inverse of the feedback tubes. Nobody was on board. Nobody understood what this was going to be or whether it was going to work or not, until the very end, when there was a blue man that kind of saw how it should be done, and sold the piece on stage. And it made me very happy. There's this carnival game called Whack-A-Mole, which you may have seen. And my idea was just to make it into a musical instrument, but like literally, it's really a big table that moles come out of. And when you hit one, it makes a musical note. And when you don't hit one, it just makes a bonk noise. And it was going to be this sort of thing where the blue man is trying to learn the instrument, and that there's some kind of triumphant moment at the end. This was part of it was a larger piece near the end of the show in which the blue man gets on the back of this giant sort of monster he's riding, and this game is on top of the monster, and then the monster gives birth to a giant steel egg out of its tail, which actually contains an audience member. It was all pretty wacky and took a lot of faith on everyone's part to build it all and get it to the point where it can get on the stage. And there was the first part where you have to compose the music for it, which Andrew has talked about a little bit. And in this case, it's a new instrument. So how many notes does it have? How heavy is the mallet? How fast can you play from this to this? And again, this is Jeff Turlick, my friend, who's actually in that room right next to me, is like getting this download of information from me so he can write some music for it. And to give him some inspiration, I think I take a video of me just improvising some stuff on there, so he gets an idea of what the feeling of the instrument might be. And the music turned out to be really epic and big and really fun. But we got to the rehearsals, and none of the three blue men that were scheduled to be on stage for that piece understood it at all, because it was just too bizarre. So it's not something you've seen before. And so unless you've got the specific vision or for what it should be, it's quite hard to get into character. And plus they had to learn to play the music, which was pretty difficult, actually. Luckily for me, there was a blue man who had broken his leg and was sitting out rehearsals, waiting for his turn to go on. So for days, he was suffering in the audience while the other three guys were totally boning it. And while I'm sitting next to him, kind of talking him through how it should go, he's overhearing me complain and stuff like that. And at one point, he finally just like picks the crutches up or whatever, hobbles up on stage and like, move over, let me drive. And it was great. He was learning by counterexample, and it was a super, everyone in the room was like, oh, that's how it goes. So sometimes you don't know who your allies are going to be, but you definitely need some throughout the entire process to get a thing done, because especially I don't think I've ever done any truly solo work in the 20 years at that place. It was always pretty widely collaborative, and from any corner. And that's the Whack-A-Mole. I wish we had a video to show you of it, but if you've played Whack-A-Mole, you can kind of imagine.
Just quick time check. We've got about 6 slides left, and definitely want to save time for questions. So I'm going to cruise through. This is, I hope, is capturing most of my feeling working at Blue Man, trying to build my first set of PVCs at the Lower East Side studio. Bill's in the other room creating a spreadsheet with lengths and notes and everything. So I'm just going to breeze through, but a lot of trial and error. It always works. And once you crack the code on the first one, the next one always goes a little bit better.
Oh yeah, this is another lifelong advice thing of just what has always been good for my career, I think, is the doing stuff you can't do. I mean, these are all like cliches at this point, but it's really true. You say yes to everything, but like especially stuff that it shouldn't be able to be done. And this is another version where the ideas can come from anywhere. In this case, there's a Chicago a company called JC They make outdoor advertising, and they had talked to our local marketing person in the Chicago show that they were going to give over one of their bus shelters to different people to do something kind of wacky and special with it. Mostly it meant that people were, wrapping their billboard around the whole thing or something, but we wanted to make it into an instrument. And there were a couple of things that we were looking to do. We were trying to experiment with interactive video at the time. So we needed a project to work on that. We also had an idea for this electroacoustic PVC where you have a transducer on the end of the PVC that is playing a sample that is tuned to the same pitch as the length of the pipe. And then there's also the matter of they're going to put this bus shelter that I want to make to be a real playable instrument on the streets of Chicago, right across from the Bean in Millennium Park on Michigan Avenue in July. Like there's a lot of the thermal load, the vandalism, there's a ton of stuff to worry about. And as you can see in the bottom right, there's not that much room to put anything. It's just a couple of pillars with a box it's normally just a light box. But it turned out that the people at JC were totally supportive and cool, and the people in Chicago really wanted to do something ambitious. So they sent us the bus shelter in New York, and we built it in the lobby of the recording studio, and then shipped it back there in the middle of some night, hoisted it off on a crane, and it totally worked. And from that, we developed some code that we hadn't before for generative video. We developed an instrument that had these where you didn't have to hold the paddles, because I didn't like the idea of tethers and people were just going to take things. So each note has this torsion spring with a piece of Delrin and some other rubber that it bounces off of the thing. And then, as you can see, maybe you can tell what's happening. I've just hit the note that's at the center of that star-like thing. So the harder you hit a note, the faster the interactive video goes. That's like centered on there. It was really fun and successful, and it just came from two people completely outside of our company, even with some with like the prompt, and us seeing an opportunity to dig in. It was really, really super fun. Next.
All right. All right, I'll try and be fast. I know we're running out of time. So I feel really lucky in what I do, because there focuses, gray areas, but there's focuses in audio of there's a recording engineer, mixing engineer, producer, all are slightly different hats, and I am one of those people that does I do all three of them. And so the producer in me, the music producer in me, will oftentimes be part of the conversations of what the concept is and what the final presentation should be. And then the engineer in me is the one that uses the, facilitates that idea in technical ways. So I feel like that the engineer in me is more of the science in that way. And so I'm lucky because I feel like I can be on both sides of that conversation. And so oftentimes once a vision is decided on, like say you have a song and you've decided that the presentation of the song, it should be sort of feel intimate and close. So what are the decisions then? Right from the start, you're looking at the parts of a song in a demo form and decide the instrumentation that might work for that. Then there's the presentation of the actual sonics of it. So how would you treat a drum kit? How would you tune a drum kit? What is the room that you would use to record it in? What is the specific microphones? And then what is the sort of technical makeup of those microphones, or the preamps that you're using, or the instruments that you're using? Are you using old opto tube compressors that are going to give a certain sound, or a faster, more modern chip-based compressor? All of these things, every single decision is going to affect the final presentation, and therefore potentially the final emotional reaction to whatever this song is, right? And so these conversations are constant in my head from the beginning till it's done and out there in the world. And the reason I'm talking about all this is I don't know how much this would is applicable to the conversations that you're having or the conversations that you will have, but I have found more and more that you have to decide when to get into those weeds in talking about your process. Because for me, I used to try to involve people a lot more in all of these little sort of like minute detail decisions. And I found that I was actually losing the confidence of the people I was working with because I was confusing them with stuff that they don't need to hear about. Like by the time they're working with me, there's a trust in me to bring my side of it. So these days, when I'm having these conversations with people I work with, there's a lot more listening than I'm doing than talking. I want to hear where they're coming from, what they want. And then the conversation in my head is pretty out there. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand the language with the people that you're working with. Like a lot of the people that I work with, they know what's good, they know what's bad, they know what they want from an artistic perspective, and they don't care what microphone I use. I care, and I know which microphone to use and which, all of the stuff to use to make it work. But anyway, I just want to share that.
And this one for me is a bit anecdotal. This was in Chicago. The Blue Man cast was performing with the Youth Symphony there. And so this was our set of PVCs, 92 notes, and it was, we were in New York and kept it in a warehouse. And so I was responsible for the tuning of it. And it's always a learning moment. And I tuned it in New York in a warehouse on a 71-degree day. And you go through and there's these little caps on the end, and longer is lower. So you go through, you pull out these caps, and you have a bandsaw or some sandpaper, and you're just making incremental changes to lengthen and shorten these tubes so they're in tune, and not just in tune individually, but in tune with themselves. And so this was tuned in New York, spring day, I'm guessing. And then we sent it to Chicago, and it happened to be a heat wave, and it was in the 90s. So the Blue Men in the orchestra, and as you know, orchestras are very particular about their tuning. All of a sudden, this instrument is sharp. And so one of the exciting and terrifying aspects of doing this in front of live audiences, people are waiting. There's a start time to the show. So what do we do? And I don't know if you can see it, and I think it was one of the string players in Las Vegas of how do we fix this in such a short amount of time. And so on the end of these tubes is white gaff tape that was put on the end to lengthen the tubes to get it to be in tune with the orchestra for that particular performance.
Use what you got.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so this is a really funny one, the future. Just wrapping it up. You know, we have been laughing about this subject because of you know, AI and all the conversations that go around it. What we don't know, it's right around the corner. But to me, everything I've done in my life in terms of work has been based on human connection and human reaction. And so I can't really sort of steer from that in the short term. It's like you continue to sort of learn all of the tools that exist and continue to come along. You know, there's a understanding the history of my of the technology that I use is important, and also understanding the newest tools is important. And I feel like all of that helps me to it just gives me more tools to use. And at the end of it, I've always sort of tried to shy away from genre specific processes. And I feel like it's more like an all you can eat buffet style, where like the more stuff you know from these different worlds and the development of that technology, the better you are to continue to create something that's unique. And I feel like those unique presentations of creative ideas always garner a human response that you know, that's kind of why I do it. So not to say the computers won't do it too, but for me, that's what drives me.
And this is a photo of me goofing off. I really don't know, like Andrew was saying, and I don't think really anyone does. We kind of have an idea, but technology and ideas and art and culture a lot of times moves faster than the developmental process. But I want to say, like, my time with Blue Man and working on all of the creative endeavors, the one thing that is certain to me is the confidence in people's willingness and desire to create and solve problems, and just to always just keep it moving forward. And if you can have some fun doing it, you got to figure it out.
And I would say the thing that's helped me most, and will continue to help me, and it's helping me right here, right now in Abu Dhabi, is don't be greedy with, like, the best people I know will share anything that they know so happily. And I was going to talk a little bit about maker fairs, so that when they started to get like people had like proprietary knowledge booths practically, you know, it just seemed so antithetical to what the scene was supposed to be, you know. And I just feel like there's no mystery ever, and there's nothing that should ever be guarded. Everything should be open source. Everything should be free to share. And the more I've done that, the more I've been invited to work, and the better my life has been. And I know that that's never going to go away.
Well, I want to thank Ben and Andrew and Bill immensely for a very informative and interesting presentation. And I realize we're a little bit over time, but I think we do have a few minutes if people have questions or comments. And I, for one, there's a lot of really interesting ideas from the things that you have shared that we could even apply to things we do here in education research and things we're looking at doing here at the Center for Astrophysics. So thank you very much again. And we do have a few minutes for questions. and comments. If anybody would like to unmute and go ahead and throw your thoughts out there.
Like, I guess I have a, it was going to be a question, but then you answered it and you didn't. So, so now it's a comment, which is, I really like how you emphasize, all the fact that you're really emphasizing experimentation and collaboration with as many inputs as possible from your, from your teammates. And you're kind of on the hairy edge of what's possible. So failure is always possible. And so my question was going to be, could you talk about an epic failure that then moved you forward? And you ended up doing that. But
we have so many more. We have so
yeah,
many.
I think that's a good point, Mary. And I have that takeaway as well of the collaboration and the teamwork and the support network that goes into all of this. And when we're looking at, okay, how do kids get interested in pursuing these kinds of things? What is their support network around them? And, what kind of inspiration do they have, watching people such as yourselves or seeing something and realizing they don't have to do this by themselves, but you have this surrounding team and this network and this support to help you, go forward and create these failures and then keep on going and pursue your passion. Any other comments or questions from people?
I had a question.
Yeah, Alex.
Hi, this is a great presentation. Thank you so much. Really has opened so many interesting lines of interest. But one of them is, what is your the role of audience research? Do you do any kind of polling or sample things for audiences that aren't paying so you can really try new things, or do you do kind of an incremental research program?
We really did enjoy that. And it was often led, honestly, because our days are really busy. And so it would end up being driven by our marketing department because that's their focus and their interest. But it was always something we really welcomed. And there was a moment about 10 years ago where I met a really interesting young student from MIT named Elliot. I'm now forgetting his last name, but he started a company called Empath that had a galvanic skin response wristband that would then track whatever along with, so he'd record the show, so you'd have an audio of the show, and then you could see with the audio like what the heart rate and the skin response was and what people actually thought. And I thought that was brilliant, and I really appreciated where that was going and what the potential for that was. But it turned out that it was again like not enough time to really put it to use in a super creative way where we would maybe write a new piece around it, or even just like find a workshop where we could just work with that and see what it would tell us. So I think that's something somebody still needs to do.
It would be cool to do that during a live show where you had the reaction. So as it got, look at people's fear, like I know sitting in the front row, you're wearing those raincoats and still you kind of want to sit back, like, where do I hide? Because it gets really intense. But then you'd want to know like how to modulate that. And you could do that with one of these biofeedback things. That's a cool idea.
Elliot Hedman. Yes, thank you. That's totally who it was.
I had a quick question, if there's still time.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think I was really inspired by all of you when you're talking about how trying things when you don't really know as much about them. That's something that I tend to do. Jack of all trades, master of none for me specifically. But I do find sometimes it can be like a struggle to have like sort of the right terminology for this stuff. Sorry, I have misbehaving puppies. Do you find like now we've been working with something called data sonification using NASA data of images like the one behind me and then translating it into sound, for example. But we've had like, I'm popping the link in the chat, but we've had like a lot of interest from music producers and arts and entertainment kind of folks that are interested in incorporating this type of sonification into their work, but they're asking for like, they're coming at it from a very technical sound-based approach. So I guess I would ask, just because you're experts in sound, do you have any sort of, good explainers that you kind of refer people to that are just sort of starting out in sound or coming to sound from a different kind of perspective as to like where to learn the lingo? Weird question perhaps, but since you're all here.
It's a really good question. I have, from my experience, there's people on my side of the studio glass that see things. There's two ways. There's people that speak in very creative ways, and there's people that speak in very technical ways, and they see the job differently too. Like I've worked with artists that I'll be talking about like a creative investment in the project and the recording, and they look at me with this blank face because they think of it as a technical process in a room to capture what they're doing, And then there's other people that just talk wildly in nothing but art and emotion terms. So it's a little tricky. I think that, with experience, you start to sort of understand which version of that conversation you're having. And sort of lean in that way, but once again, I think that the more technical those conversations become, the more you might lose people. So I always tend to start with really bad, simple metaphors and then dial in depending on the audience.
That's actually very helpful to hear. And I perhaps would like to sneak in one more slightly technical question, but you mentioned that you were starting to do surround sound in virtual reality for some projects. What kind of work are you doing for that? Because we've been trying to attach the sonifications that I put in the chat. We've been trying to attach those to three-dimensional models in a VR space. And it's kind of been a bit of a struggle, technically speaking. Again, this is something that we don't really have much experience in. So I'm just curious what kind of projects you're doing in that space and if you've got any main takeaways.
There was a few different projects with Blue Man specific with a couple different VR companies that we did. Usually it was like kind of music video idea, but it was recorded live and then mixed with VR audio that was, it's all supposed to be 3D, it's all supposed to be surround. But my experiences were that the technology, this is a few years ago now, but my experiences were that the technology with both companies we worked with, it was emerging, but still clunky. So I believe my process, I actually mixed it in full 7.1 surround sound and then folded it into the technology of the different VR companies we were working with. And it worked okay, but again, it was clunky. Beyond that, that was just my experience. So I'm imagining that it's getting better, but it was not a flawless, smooth experience as you're panning around the whole thing. Like usually, by the time you're looking at the drum, then the drum finds you a little bit. So I think it's
actually helpful to hear too, because if it's
That was, though,
a few years ago, that's good.
that was meant to be accepting input, right? So which is slightly different maybe than if you're just creating some sort of 18 speaker environment, which is actually what's going on here at this gig. There are plenty of ways that you can crack that and have the sound really feel like it's coming from any sort of place. I think that we were having trouble having a different one computer system taking the tracking data and then spitting it out to another one, and there was latency along the way. But I think that those are kind of like two different problems you have to solve, you know.
That's right. I mean, this was a pre-recorded thing. It wasn't part of a live experience with VR imagery. The whole thing was like, put your phone on and dial into, I can't remember which one it was, but put it into the goggles and you're hearing a pre-recorded thing with pre-recorded video and all that. So it is a little bit different that way.
Cool. That helps a lot though. Thanks. Geeky questions for the win. Thank you.
And I don't know if you saw, Kim, but I'll email it to you. Alex put a textbook in the chat.
I did see that. Yeah.
Okay, very
Hopefully
good.
it's an easy textbook.
All right. We can take one last question, I think, and then we probably need to let people go. Or one last comment.
I'll take that.
Thanks.
Have you guys ever thought of having, in all your free time amongst producing and creating, ushering like little investigative groups of students that see what you do? They experience your performance, but maybe seeing behind the screen or in the shop, that type of experimentation, I think that would be a terrific outreach tool, particularly in underserved areas where you perform. Just throwing it out there, because getting behind the screen and what you guys showed us intrigues me, and I'm sure others on this. So that would be very cool.
Yeah, I love that.
100%.
In all your free time, of course. So.
Well, I was big at Blue Man, and it's been constant throughout my whole life, working with internship programs and working with interns, and you know, that's how I started. I still remember getting the sandwiches for all the cool kids in the room. I, you know, for whatever the 30 years that I've been working, I'm still in touch with many of the people that were interns for me at that stage in their life, and have seen them grow to be in really fantastic places. So I think it's super important. And to Bill's point earlier, like, there's no information, like, I can't stand producers that or tech music people that like won't share their secrets. I think that's so silly. It's all out there eventually, but like the more you share with people, the more you learn yourself. So like all of that is I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
All right. And with that, I think we'll wrap up for today. But once again, I want to thank Ben Flint, Andrew Schneider, and Bill Swartz for their time and effort and expertise, and Ben for putting together the slideshow and manning that. We really appreciate your time putting this together and sharing all of your great information and experience and pathways with us. We would love to welcome you back, and you can work with many different projects that are going on here, transferring visual to sound, sound to visual, et cetera, that I know are going on, much like Kim's project as well. So once again, thank you very, very much. And we will send out the link for the recording to this, and I'll send it to the three of you as well. So thank you very much again, and safe travels to you, Bill.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.